Einen schönen guten Vormittag aus Den Haag und herzlich willkommen zu unserem Webinar zum Thema Food Transition, die Proteinwende in den Niederlanden. Ein sehr spannendes Thema, das immer mehr und dann nicht nur in den Niederlanden an Bedeutung gewinnt, sondern auch wahrscheinlich für Sie als Zuhörer immer wichtiger wird und mit dem Sie sich schon jetzt oder in Zukunft beschäftigen werden müssen. Mein Name ist Martina Eicher. Ich bin Projektmanagerin am Außenwirtschaftscenter Den Haag und für den Bereich Lebensmittel- und Agrarindustrie zuständig. Ich freue mich heute sehr, Ihnen gleich im Anschluss ein paar Informationen über den niederländischen Markt im Allgemeinen geben zu dürfen, Sie zu informieren, was wir als Außenwirtschaftscenter auch für Sie tun können und einige Zahlen und Trends zum Lebens- und Agrarmarkt in den Niederlanden und auch Österreich. Aber noch viel mehr freue ich mich, dass wir 2 Experten gewinnen konnten, die als Vortragende Sie über dieses wichtige Thema informieren werden. Nämlich Roger von Hoesel, er ist Managing Director bei FoodX und wird Sie über das Agri-Food-Innovationsökosystem, ziemlich langes Wort, aber es wird alles noch erklärt werden, was das genau bedeutet, informieren. Und Jeroen Willemsen, Experte im Bereich Proteinwende in den Niederlanden, der Ihnen dazu die neuesten Trends geben wird. Die beiden Herren werden in englischer Sprache ihren Vortrag halten. Beide sind in Wageningen im Zentrum der Forschung für eben Food- und Agrarwirtschaft tätig. Dann zeige ich Ihnen kurz das Programm, damit Sie einen Einblick haben, was äh, passieren wird. Sie sehen, am Schluss gibt es die Möglichkeit, dass wir Ihnen Fragen, die Sie im Laufe des Webinars in den Chat stellen können, beantworten. Sie sehen wahrscheinlich oben Chat und F&A. Sie können beide Funktionen verwenden, um die Fragen zu stellen. Das Webinar sollte rund 12:15 Uhr beendet sein. Noch einige wichtige Informationen. Das Webinar wird aufgezeichnet und ist in Kürze über YouTube abrufbar. Dasselbe gilt auch für die Präsentationsunterlagen. Die werden wir auf unserer Länderseite auf wko.at hochladen und können Sie dann jederzeit herunterladen. Wie gesagt, Fragen während des Webinars gerne im Chat, aber auch natürlich immer gerne später an uns oder an unsere beiden Sprecher. Damit komme ich zu uns, dem Außenwirtschaftscenter Den Haag und dem Außenwirtschaftsbüro Brüssel. Ein kurzer Überblick, was wir machen. Wir betreuen das Gebiet des Benelux, Niederlande, Belgien, Luxemburg. Unser Wirtschaftsdelegierter Michael Spalek mit dem Team von 9 Mitarbeitern, 5 in Belgien, die Luxemburg und Belgien bearbeiten, in Brüssel muss ich sagen, und wir 4 Mitarbeiter in Den Haag für die Niederlande zuständig. Im Prinzip leisten wir individuelles Service an 1400 österreichische Unternehmer pro Jahr. Dabei kommt es zu 5000 Kontakten mit Unternehmen aus Österreich. Wir machen das auch, 15 Veranstaltungen pro Jahr im Benelux und oder Österreich zu organisieren. Möchte ich kurz auf die nächste wichtige Veranstaltung in Österreich, nämlich den Exporttag am 18. Juni hinweisen, wo Sie gerne unseren Wirtschaftsdelegierten auch persönlich treffen können. Beide Büros gibt es schon sehr lange, Brüssel seit 1947, Den Haag seit 1951. Sollten Sie uns einmal besuchen wollen, finden Sie hier unsere beiden Adressen. Dann gehen wir gleich weiter zum Königreich der Niederlande mit ein paar Zahlen, die ich jetzt nicht genau ins Detail erläutern will, nur kurz und wichtig. Für Österreich waren die Niederlande im Jahr 2023 der 11. Handelspartner und der 15. Exportmarkt und die Niederlande für Österreich das 8. wichtigste Lieferland. Also das ist, glaube ich, sicher eine Erwähnung wert. Wenn wir uns noch einige Fakten zu den Niederlanden ansehen, 17,7 Millionen Einwohner, das heißt fast doppelt so viel als Österreich. Die sind bekannt als Innovationsführer für Medizin, Robotik, aber vor allem auch Agrar- und Nahrungsmittelindustrie. Der Markt ist offen, international orientiert, eben auch sehr für Innovationen bereit, also auch immer sehr gut, wenn man exportieren möchte, auch sich da am niederländischen Markt mal zu erproben. Wie gesagt, der 15. wichtigste Exportmarkt für Österreich sind die Niederlande mit 3,7 Milliarden Euro Volumen. Es gibt in den Niederlanden oder nach den Niederlanden aus Österreich 2000 Unternehmen, die hierher exportieren und wir haben 170 österreichische Niederlassungen. Und dann, ganz wichtig natürlich, darum sind wir auch heute ein bisschen hier, nach den USA sind die Niederlande der zweitgrößte Agrarexporteur der Welt. Kurze Zahl noch über Österreich. Die österreichischen Lebensmittel- und Agrarexporte betrugen weltweit im Jahr 2022 16,25 Milliarden Euro. Davon gingen in die Niederlande 561 Millionen. Und allgemein sind 75% der Exporte gehen in die EU-Staaten. Wenn wir uns kurz ein paar Trends anschauen, Österreich liegt europaweit auf Platz 1 als veganer Anteil. Das ist, glaube ich, ganz interessant. Und zwar ist, ich habe mir das jetzt kurz aufgeschrieben, seit 2021 ist der Anteil an vegan lebenden Menschen in Österreich von 3% auf 5% gestiegen. Also das ist sicher erwähnens- und erwägenswert. Der Markt für pflanzliche Produkte boomt, der Fleischkonsum sinkt. Und dann eine Mitteilung auch in eigener Sache, möchten wir Sie gerne zu diesem Thema Proteinwende, Food Transition tiefer informieren und eine Zukunftsreise im nächsten Jahr organisieren, wo Sie die Möglichkeit haben, eben die Forschungsstellen in Wageningen zu besuchen, sich auszutauschen, Startups zu sprechen. Wenn Sie Interesse haben, bitte sich gerne bei uns melden, würde uns natürlich sehr freuen. Hier sind noch unsere Kontaktdaten. Hier sehen Sie auch noch unser komplettes Team mit unserem Wirtschaftsdelegierten Michael Spalek ganz links. Wir freuen uns immer auf Ihre Kontakte. Damit komme ich zu Roger van Hoesel, who will be our first speaker and explaining us more about the agri-food innovation ecosystem in the Netherlands. Roger, yes, thank you. You're here, great. So I say the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martina. Can you see the slides changing now? Because they were frozen for me.
No, you have to take control first. The button with take control.
Okay. Now. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Yes. So thank you for inviting me to this important webinar. As already was mentioned, my name is Roger van Hoesel, and I work for this organization called FoodX. And FoodX was launched about 1.5 years ago only, so it's relatively new, and it was launched to see to it that international guests who are interested in connecting to the Netherlands, if it comes to agri and food, get in touch with the people that they really need to speak to. So what we do basically in the core is that we organize visit programs for international business-to-business delegations. That is what we do. And in the coming 20 minutes, I will try to depict a picture of how the collaboration in the Netherlands, if it comes to agriculture and food, how it more or less works, what the most important pillars are, but also about what the challenges are that we face and how we try to deal with that. So this is the menu. First, I would like to give a short snapshot of agriculture and food in the Netherlands. Then touch upon the challenges that not only the Netherlands, but more in general, we as agri-food countries face. And then go to the ecosystem. So tell you a bit more about the various players in there and how they all collaborate. And of course, I will end with a few conclusions. Now, first, the kind of snapshot. No, I don't know who has been to the Netherlands, but it's a tiny country. It's in terms of size, it's only half of Austria, in the northwestern part of Europe. And yeah, often it surprises people if you mention that it's the second largest exporter of agricultural products after the US and even before Brazil, which indeed is quite remarkable. And it also has a lot of implications, and I'll come back to that later. It's also a country that, if you look at statistics in terms of yields, it's among the highest known, for instance, if it comes to milk production, but also in general, if we talk about agriculture and the productivity in agriculture, it's very high. And all that is a result of a policy that actually started already in the 1950s, when it was decided in the Netherlands that we not want to depend too much on imports from other countries if it comes to agricultural products. So being a small country, efficiency and productivity became a very important part of policy and the design of research and everything related to that. So that for a long time has been the core focus of this country. Here you see some statistics. The Netherlands represents a bit more than 6% of global agriculture and food. It's an important industry in the Netherlands. Almost more than 9% actually of the people work in the industry. It's not always seen by other parts of the country that it is so big. Also, the number of companies being active in the sector is more than 9%. And maybe the most important figure on this slide is the export value actually. So more than 14%, representing 62 billion euros. And we've seen over the years, probably that's comparable to Austria, that export performance has been quite stable. So even if the economy was in bad shape, we saw that the most important sector that kept up, let's say, the performance was agriculture and food. So over the years, we see that also in terms of policy, that there is a kind of re-evaluation in a positive sense of the importance of agriculture and food in this country. It's not a picture to show well, where the country stands. It's based on Eurostat statistics, and it shows that also if it comes to innovation, it's doing quite well. It's an overall picture. This does not only include agriculture and food, but if you would specifically look at agriculture and food and compare that sector to the same sector in other countries, probably it's again among the leaders in Europe. So in that sense, yeah, I think there is something to be proud of. Martina just mentioned Wageningen, which is in the central eastern part of the country, you could say, where you see Food Valley also being mentioned. It's Wageningen. It's only a small town, but it's quite a special town, and also that region surrounding Wageningen, in the sense that there's a very high number of people that work on the future of our food. There's a important university, but also many others in the field are based there. At the same time, it's not the only place where people work or companies work on the future of food. It really depends a bit on the history, on where the knowledge centers are based, where the focus is in a certain region. But for instance, if you look at Seed Valley, which is here in the western part, it's called the province of North Holland. We see that, if it comes to the research and development in seeds for vegetables, most leading companies in the world have their R&D facilities over there. So it's a very high concentration of plant breeding and seed development in that particular part of the country. Dairy, a lot takes place in the northern part of the country, as well as for Potato Valley, potato growing. But for instance, the production in horticulture is strongly concentrated not so far from Rotterdam, so in the western part of the country again. So there's quite a spread, depending again on the characteristics of the region, primarily in history, where innovation takes place in the country. Now, it's certainly not only about research. I think another important element, if it comes to the characteristics of agriculture and food in the Netherlands, is that there's quite a number of established leading companies in the different parts of the food chains based in the Netherlands. Not all of them are historically Dutch, but for instance, companies like Cargill and Danone and Kraft Heinz have been around for a long time, and maybe Cargill maybe for 80 years or more. And what it has meant is that these companies, in a sense, feel a bit Dutch. They often collaborate in public-private partnerships in this country, in research programs and other consortia, and it helps a lot. It doesn't mean, and Jeroen Willemsen will come back to that later for sure, that all innovation comes from bigger companies. No, certainly not. But it is important to have these companies with their global outreach in the system being active. So that's why I like to show this picture as well. Now, this until now is quite a sunny picture that I have painted, like being the second largest exporter in the world, being high on the innovation rankings and so on. But for sure, this system, which was very much based on high productivity, high yields, efficiency, and so on, in a small country, also is facing more and more challenges over time. And I would like to also pay attention to that, of course. Here the slide says that we are preparing for a perfect storm. Maybe we are already in that storm, right? So, climate change, geopolitical instability, but also population growth are elements certainly also felt in Austria, other parts of Europe, but also in this tiny country in the Netherlands. And it has enormous impact on talent, on resources, energy that we can use. So we see shortages, we see rising prices all over the place. So I don't know how it is for you, but to me personally, it struck me the speed which this storm started, in a sense, and also the impact it has had in such a short period. So in this small country, agriculture is very important. Also, the impact of these external elements are crucial. Here's some other figures. Next year, according to WHO, about 20% of people are obese. I think females somewhat higher and males somewhat lower. 33% of all climate emissions is mainly due to livestock and land use changes. And an enormous percentage of food that we produce globally is thrown away. You always try to imagine how it would be if you would throw 10% less away, what already the impact on food security and food availability would be. But these are staggering figures. So it is obvious that things have to change. And a lively debate in this country, both in politics as in private sector and in academia, on how to tackle all these challenges. Well, these pictures are well known nowadays, and of farmers protesting. I think I checked it actually. I think the first serious protests of farmers going to The Hague already started in October 2019, so that's almost 5 years ago. Later on, they became more intense and more large scale, and in a sense, it's a kind of expression of change, maybe uncertainty, how to react to the outside world, and also to politics certainly in this country. We now see these kind of protests, of course, also in other countries throughout Europe. But it's not so strange that it started a bit in this country, where it is so small. We have so little land, which to a large extent is being used by agriculture. We have so many animals in that tiny country that here it was felt really strongly from the beginning onwards. So it is clear that things have to change, and these changes are being addressed on a large scale. And I would say it could also always be faster, but also at quite a high speed. And later on, Jeroen Willems will tell more about all the developments if it comes to a protein shift. If I try to explain a bit more about how that works in reality, I love to talk about the ecosystem, the collaboration between partners, government, companies, big and small, and also academia. And I think that is one of the strong pillars of the Dutch system, which also makes me pretty much convinced that also these challenges and transitions in which we are right now can also be faced successfully in the future. I try to depict a few of these elements, and one actually is a kind of historical side to it. It's good to realize that this country has a few characteristics which are very different from Austria, for sure. One of them is, of course, that we're adjacent to the North Sea. In the left-hand side of this picture, you see population density, and you can immediately see that most people live in the West. Left-hand side of the country, where the most big cities are located. But as you can see in the right-hand picture, that is also the place which, to a large extent, is below sea level. So in itself, that's not a very good combination, but that is how it historically grew. And of course, as a trading nation, that also makes sense. But with rising sea levels, that is not so easy. At the same time, we see that there is a long history here in this country, and that's why I mention it, of engineering the land. You see here a picture on the left-hand side of the Beemster, which is a region not far from Amsterdam, which probably is one of the first reclaimed pieces of land in this country 400 years ago. And already in those days, there was this collaboration between, let's say, the authorities and farmers, maybe entrepreneurs, to call them like that, already in those days, who said, look, it looks like this is going to be really fertile land if we make it dry, so if we pump out the water. So government, can we not make a deal with you that if the land is going to be reclaimed, we'll use it, you'll also get part of the profit. So reclaiming land, engineering the land, there's no hesitance so much in this country, and that has been going on, experimenting with nature for a long time. Now, another element which is strictly related to that is the knowledge base in this country. It was already mentioned, Wageningen University. It's a university only in the green domain. It's the only one of its kind in the Netherlands, and it started a long time ago to actually, at a high level, train farmers and do experiments in those days. So more than, well, it's almost 150 years ago. It was started in this particular part of the country because here you could do all the experiments for different kinds of soils, also find in other parts of the country, sand, clay, and peat soil. And out of that grew an international, well-known university which acts as an enormous source for talent, for more fundamental research, and a kind of magnet also to interact with companies nowadays. So it's an important element of this system. But it's not only Wageningen University. We are in a kind of fortunate position here that there's lots of other public, semi-public, and private organizations that develop knowledge used by farmers and by companies. They all have their own role, and they're in different parts, let's say, of the whole, what we often call technology readiness level, tier all 1 to 9. Some of them more applied, do more applied research and closer to companies and farmers. Some are more fundamental, but it's a whole system of players in there that play a role in one way or another. And I think this helps a lot. So we don't only depend on universities, but many other players as well. Also holds for the educational system. So we have a green column here in this country, which implies that not only at the university level, but also at the applied sciences and the vocational level, there is educational institutes that only focus on the green domain. And on top of that, a lot of lifelong learning takes place. And nowadays, farmers, of course, have to be able to work with big data, all kind of imaging technology, all kinds of technologies, new elements that weren't there, in previous generations. So there's a lot of investment in keeping them up to date, or at least make them aware of the new possibilities which are there, so that they can apply it too. And we think that's also an important pillar of what is taking place here. Then the entrepreneurship part. For a long time, a weakness throughout Europe. We always talked about the European disease, and so much different from the US in the sense that we all have good universities, but the gap between universities and the start of new entrepreneurs, new companies, was too big. And I have to say that during the last 20 years, certainly last 10 years, a lot has changed. In the beginning, it went slow. I recall that first trainings were given at Wageningen University on entrepreneurship, and that was really new in those days. And it was felt like, should we work on entrepreneurship? That's for other people. But that has changed enormously over time. So now you see a very rich system of startup support programs, investors, bankers, corporates being involved in that system to interact with small companies, which is incomparable to the situation, let's say, 10 years ago. It's still not there. There's always a lack of all kinds of stuff. But since we have this lively culture here of debating and looking at what things are still not strong enough, you see improvements, I would say, every year in terms of growing of the ecosystem of entrepreneurship. Here's a graph. It's only 2022, so it's a bit old, but it's the latest one available, showing deals being made in different European countries. The Netherlands was here ranked 4th, which is not on top, but given the fact that the other countries are much bigger than the Netherlands, it was not too bad at all. So yes, at the moment the situation is not too good in terms of capital available. At the same time, I would say, if you look at the system, it's improving all the time. Then the last element, government policy. Both our countries, of course, being member of EU, makes a big difference. And we see that at all 3 levels, EU level, Netherlands national level, but also the provincial level, the consistency of policy, if it comes to support for innovative efforts in the agri-food, is an important pillar of the ecosystem here. So we see that quite a number of research companies, SMEs, and of course universities are very active in European programs, make use of that. But that also holds for the national level. And on the right-hand side, you see the shape of the province of Gelderland. And Gelderland, so that's the yellow one in the eastern part of the Netherlands, in the middle, is the province where also Wageningen is based. And this province has had for almost 20 years now a consistent policy of supporting in all kinds of ways innovation in agriculture and food. And it has helped a lot that they did it already for such a long time, that they are also very connective if it comes to connecting other provinces to what is being done in this part of the country, and that helps a lot. It really feels like partnerships between governments and industry and academia. That also holds for the national policy, I would say. It's here you see that we have a kind of, they call it mission-driven innovation policy. So if it comes to circular agriculture, if it comes to climate-proof agriculture, food production, if it comes to climate-proof urban and rural areas, healthy and safe food, as well as a sustainable North Sea. Again, long-time consistent policy. And the interesting part here is that via what is called the top sector policy here, we see that there is a close interaction between the companies and academia and government in defining what the topics should be, which are supposed to be supported by the government. And I can tell you that companies play an important role in making those decisions and bringing the priorities in. So also that one is pretty important, I would say. Therefore, I'm almost there. And I think it's also almost there if it comes to the time I was being allocated. But just to draw a few conclusions. We see that global challenges to the food system, of course, are enormous, and all of us know that. But it seems that in this tiny country where we have so much food production concentrated on a small piece of land, is being magnified. You can see it everywhere. There's always, if it comes to the land, an issue in this country. So here we see these global challenges right away back in the system, and we feel that we're in the middle of a major transition. So for sure, in 10 years from now, agri-food and food production, the food system here in the Netherlands looks completely different from what we used to have in the past 50 or 60 years. We also see that other countries are following. They will face the same problems, sometimes given different climate and soil conditions, of course. It looks somewhat different, but the changes that we face are there everywhere. And what we try to do here, and that is also what I try to bring across, is story that it's not one particular group of players to great and join forces. And I therefore really hope that you are in a position to visit us soon. and we can bring you in contact with those parties that work on this change, this transition on a basis. I'm very much looking forward to that. Thank you so much for your attention, and this was the end of my presentation. Jeroen, I would like you to join me. And we see Jeroen already. Where is he? Yes, there's Jeroen. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce my to you. It was in the protein transition, and there's someone in the Netherlands who could tell you more about what is going on here is Jeroen. So I would like to give the floor to you, Jeroen.
Thank you, Roger. I'm just testing because just the final few seconds, I seem to have a hampering internet connection. Can somebody please confirm?
It's not you. It was Roger. It was not you. Unfortunately, his connection was the problem. You are okay. So
okay.
Please introduce yourself again because his introduction was a bit broken off.
Yes. Yeah, so thanks, Roger. Actually, Roger being the former director of Food Valley NL, and that's the organization that I represent. Just going to the first slide of my presentation, here it is. It's also my pleasure to share my thoughts with you on a very important and relevant topic of the food transition, the protein transition, more particular in my case, a challenge that we share as Austria and the Netherlands. So also happy to share some thoughts on collaborative action. So Food Valley NL is an organization, a foundation actually, that's been around since 2004. And together with, at this moment, over 450 actors from all over the world, we are shaping the future of food, a future which is more sustainable, more healthy, and offering affordable food for everybody. And as Roger already stated, besides circular agri-food and food and health, protein transition is one of the major topics of Food Valley and what we're doing with the ecosystem around it, with, at this moment, more than 150 parties just on the protein transition as well. Let me share with you some actual developments and some numbers on the protein transition in the Netherlands, and I hope to inspire you also to seek further cooperation. So first of all, what is the protein transition or the Proteinwende? Well, it may sound a little bit strange, but actually the protein transition is not particularly something of the future, but actually it's something of the past. Because actually since 1950, since approximately a few years ago, we have already encountered a protein transition, but it was going the wrong way. Since 1950, we have dramatically increased our production and consumption of animal-based proteins. Here, visualized on the top part, increasing the consumption of animal proteins from dairy, meat, while and as well as cheese, as you can see on the bottom line. Whereas we all know by now that the overconsumption of animal proteins has its effects on climate, on nature, and also on human health. So what we call the protein transition nowadays can actually be perceived as repairing the protein transition as it was developed over the past 70 years. Going back to a more healthy and sustainable balance in more plant proteins in our diet, and again, less animal proteins. And this number of 2030 is mentioned for a reason. Because since 2022 in the Netherlands, we actually have a very specific and explicit goal where it comes to the protein transition. At the time, our Minister of Agriculture, Minister Staghouwer, claimed that by 2030, we would like to have the ratio of plant and animal proteins in the general Dutch diet restored to, again, the 50-50. That was the same ratio as we had it approximately in 1950. And this has been a very important step because now, since 2 years, we have a measurable goal, a clear ambition, and that has speed up many developments in the total ecosystem where it concerns the protein transition. We even have nowadays a national protein strategy, also stimulated by the European Union, challenging all members to think about what particular countries can do to make Europe more protein self-sufficient and less dependent on the imports of plant proteins currently used for feed, mainly also from far away. And as you notice by now in the Netherlands, the protein transition is somewhat about ratios. And talking about ratios also in terms of health, the Dutch Health Council very recently also presented a report in which they state that 50-50 is actually not the most healthiest ratio where it comes down to human health. They said that we really need to go even further and to go towards a diet in which at least 60% of all proteins consumed are from a plant-based origin. And again, this also is helping a lot in stimulating all kinds of stakeholders to really come into action where it comes to restoring that balance. Such as retailers. Nowadays, we have many retailers in the Netherlands that have also a clear protein transition target. Lidl is one, but basically all Dutch retailers have nowadays such targets. Here in this graph, you see how the different retailers have set their targets. So take, for example, Albert Heijn, which is the largest retailer in the Netherlands. Currently, 43% of all the proteins they sell is from a plant-based origin, and 57% is from an animal-based origin. And they have said by 2030, we would like to have at least 60% of all the proteins sold being plant-based. And by now, all have such targets. And this is very important because now they are really starting to benchmark to also show what they are doing to reach that benchmark. And they're also judged on where they are by societal organizations, by governments. So this is really also speed up the action that we see now in the retail. And as you may imagine, it's very important that all retailers use the same methodology to calculate the current ratio of sales in proteins. And for that, in the Netherlands, a method has been developed called the protein tracker, which all retailers are now using, so that also the outcome, the numbers, are comparable. And actually, this method will be spread across Europe soon. So perhaps also Austrian retailers can make use of that particular methodology. So where are we now in terms of actual sales? And my apologies, I see here that I've still used some Dutch names. So on the left side, where it says plantaardig, it means plant-based. And on the right side, you see dierlijk, it means animal-based. What you see here are some numbers comparing the sales of 2023 with the sales, retail sales in 2019. So that is pre-corona. I do not have the time to go in depth on all numbers, and you will have this presentation shared with you. But let me pick out just one. On the right side, you see meat. And you see some numbers. And these numbers represent the following. In 2023, all Dutch retailers together sold 11.1% less meat compared to 2019. And if you make that in absolute, if you say that in absolute amounts, the Dutch retailers in 2023 sold 85.1 million kilograms less meat compared to in 2019. And this is in line with the general developments that we see. Compared to 2008, approximately until now, the Dutch are consuming 18% less meat and 14% less dairy. Still, there is an immense overconsumption of meat and dairy compared to the Dutch general health guidelines. But still, we see, it seems that we have passed so-called peak meat, stating that the absolute maximum in meat sales is behind us. And this is very important, also a very important trigger for supermarkets, because now they actually see that they earn less money with sales on meat and dairy. So consumer behavior is changing. And that, as you can imagine, is a very important trigger and motivation also for retailers to step in. On the left side, on the other hand, you see that plant-based variations on dairy and meat are rapidly increasing. And although we are seeing a plateau at this moment, we do see that especially private label products are again on the rise. Sorry, I mean the sales of plant-based private label products. What we also see, and this is also very interesting, is that given all the developments that I just shared, is that price parity is already reality. Price parity meaning that the prices for which plant-based and animal-based products are offered are getting close to each other. Where there used to be a situation where meat was far less expensive and much more cheaper than plant-based, you see now that they are coming together. And that is very relevant also, obviously, for many consumers. It makes it easier to make the plant-based choice. And also, if you look at the nutritional scores, you see that currently, and here you see 4 products from Albert Heijn private label, 2 plant-based products on the left side and the right side, and in the middle you see 2 animal-based burgers. And you also see that besides the price, you also see that nutrition-wise, the plant-based products have made a giant leap, and they now get nutritional scores of A, whereas the animal burgers, due to their high salt content and saturated fatty acids, for example, they get a nutritional score of D. And also this is an important trigger for many consumers to make more often the plant-based choice. Another interesting development that we see in the Netherlands is the development of so-called hybrid products. Products which partly still consist of animal ingredients, but besides that also contain plant-based ingredients. So you might say the best of both worlds. And hybrids have been tried for many years in the Netherlands, and I guess also in Austria and other countries, and they failed to be successful. Why were they not successful? Because they were too intensively communicated. And many people ask themselves, okay, what is this? Is it the best of both worlds, or is it somewhat in between? So with the goals that all the retailers have stated, and the Dutch goal we have on the protein transition, hybrid products now have to be successful. So a lot of hybrid products will enter the market shortly. All big retailers are working on it on the Netherlands. And I'm looking forward also to seeing that, and also looking forward that there's not too much being communicated around it. So you might say this is also a silent transition that is happening in the Dutch supermarkets. And then there is another fascinating development in the Dutch ecosystem, and that is on cellular meat. And only last month, the first sausage was presented, containing 25% of cellular grown meat by a company called Meatable. And actually, this sausage was also tasted by some highly skilled chefs, and they were very happily surprised with the taste and the texture. The interesting thing about this is, besides legislation, as you may know, there's quite a challenge to get it approved in the European Union. This by itself is also a hybrid product. 75% of this sausage is plant-based and 25% is cellular-based. So again, this is also a very interesting solution towards future customers and consumers to adopt more plant-based. To adopt more plant-based is not just black and white, going all the way vegetarian or vegan. No, literally it's hybrid, and it's also in these kinds of products. So the ecosystem that also Roger already referred to around the protein transition is very versatile. And back in 2017, I started the protein community from Food Valley NL, and we see now currently that over 140 parties from all over the world have teamed up in that community. And they all have a shared ambition, and that is to shorten the time to market of innovative, sustainable protein solution, plant protein solutions. And this is an interesting community that's turning out to be very successful, and really also looking forward to welcoming more Austrian parties there. So this is actually a picture taken at our Food Valley office in Wageningen, where a few months ago we, at the time, our Prime Minister Rutte, who might just become the Secretary General of the NATO shortly, and we also welcomed him to our ecosystem. And the reason that I also show this picture is because on the right upper side you see a map. It's called the Protein Transition Map NL. And we have started that initiative and also presented it to Minister Rutte, because we think that the protein transition nowadays is so much more than just doing good for the environment and animal welfare, for example. It's also doing good for the economy. In other words, a serious business, the protein transition, is really becoming serious business. And we dived into that. With the result, the Protein Transition Map NL, on which at this moment, currently, I just checked yesterday, there are 508 actors present on that map. So companies and organizations that are active in the domain of protein transition. And together we have calculated and evaluated that they represent an economic value which is already close to 1 billion euros. And we've also seen that together they assure at least to 3,600 jobs in the Netherlands. And very interesting as well, we have noticed that at least 72% of all the actors on the map were already active in meat, dairy, and fish. And this is very important also from a transitional point of view, because now we see that the world of animal and plant is really coming together with all these actors active in this domain. Large actors like Friesland Campina or Vion, quite renowned companies in the dairy and the meat scope, but also younger companies that used to be active in meat, fish, and dairy. So this is really very interesting and also something to adopt and to cherish, because this is going from polarization to partnership. Well, and some to conclude with some other developments that I would like to share with you, because the protein transition is not just about changing the ratio, it's also reducing the absolute amount of proteins that we are consuming. We are over-consuming proteins. And there is a second new challenge, and that is also to look at where our proteins are grown. And in that respect, the European Union a few years ago already asked or challenged the European Union nations to start new producer and interbranch organizations. And so we have done so in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, 2 years ago, I took the initiative to start a producer organization called the Eiwitte Boeren van Nederland, or in English, the Dutch Protein Farmers, which now is an acknowledged producer organization by the Ministry of Agriculture in the Netherlands, joining forces of over 150 farmers in the Netherlands that are all growing protein-rich crops for human consumption. And they have a shared goal, and now being recognized as a producer organization, they have a far more easier job to get big deals done and also be heard in The Hague, the political center of our country, as you know. And having said that, I'm really looking forward to cooperating more with you and the Austrian stakeholders, because we do have this shared ambition to become more protein self-sufficient. And in that respect, my final slide, last year I had the privilege to join an innovation mission to Vienna on the protein transition. And it was my pleasure to award this lady, Verena Wiedekeer, who is the head of plant-based business development at Bila, with a Golden Bean Award. And actually, the Golden Bean Award was initiated a few years back by Food Valley to reward special people all around the world that are really making a difference in the protein transition. So at this moment, there are 17 people worldwide that are decorated with a golden bean, and one of them being Verena. And I'm looking forward to teaming up again with you, Austrian colleagues, and also transitional actors. And with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. And I would like you, Roger and Martina, to come and join me again. And Martina, I guess I will give the word back to you and see if there are any more questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Roger and Jeroen, for those very, very inspiring presentations. I think we really heard and learned many new things and got inspiration to keep going this way. I loved the quote, polarization instead of partnership. That's nice. That's a very nice one. I will just check if there is some questions in the Q&A left. No. Let's see. Loading. I have.
No
Oh,
direct
yes.
questions.
There
from the
is
viewers,
one
no.
question. I think it's for Jeroen mainly. The Netherlands and Austria are both challenged by the EU to act on the EU ambition, as we already heard, to become more protein self-sufficient. And yeah, maybe how can we, by joint efforts, add this in, realize this ambition? So maybe you have some ideas for us, Jeroen, with that.
Yes, and this it's a very good question. It also brings me back to actually my final slide, because when I was visiting Vienna and Bila, actually there is this Bila Plancila, and so it's a Bila that's been completely plantified, as I call it, and I find it very, very inspiring. And I think this is a very good example of how Austria is also guiding consumers towards more plant-based. And I think it's these kinds of interventions that we need to share. So on the Dutch side, we have developed this methodology, the protein tracker. We've seen the actual intervention as Bila has done in Austria. And this is very important, because we often say that becoming more protein self-sufficient is about growing more proteins and making the yields higher. So taking care of new breeds, for example. But as we all know, we can breed whatever we want, but when the products at the end of the chain are not sold and actually consumed, then we have no future-proof business case. So especially these learnings and interventions at the end of the chain, really guiding consumers towards more plant-based, I think is very valuable to share those experiences. So really looking forward also to to go more in depth in that respect, being very much inspired by the Bila example.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeroen. Now I see another question coming in. How do you tackle the vested interest of meat-based industries that are not willing to change? I think that's quite a good one. Who would like to answer this question?
Yeah, I think Jeroen deals with this on a daily basis. So, how do you deal with that? Well, I think Jeroen will certainly complement what I'm going to say now. But what I see over time is that in the beginning, and that's why you also mentioned this polarization element, it was really two worlds apart. I think that quite a number of the meat companies nowadays have seen, that things have to be changed and are at least interested or curious about what the opportunities are, also business-wise, to go into more transformation. Quite a number of them participate already in programs. And, in itself, these business models are not so easy to change. So what we shouldn't do, that's for sure, is just point at each other and say that they're doing something wrong, which is not the case. It's way too simple. And I think an important element was just touched upon by Jeroen. If you look at the slide he had on retail, the fact that the retail companies have been more outspoken and have put their targets on. Look, we all know that the system has to change, at least to some extent. So we as supermarkets are going to change and have our targets if it comes to having other products available which are more plant-based. Will certainly also will trigger companies and the vested interest into the debate. Okay, so we have to transform one way or another. It's not black and white. It's never black and white, but we have to connect. And I think that's also when you look at Jeroen's community, to put it like that, or the protein community, you see that there's quite a number of, let's say, traditional meat companies participate already in there. But Jeroen can say much more about it. But I think it is about making the connection and this combination of factors, actually.
Nice, great. Jeroen, would you like to add something to that question?
Yes, thank you, Harald, for this very relevant question. And where Roger already talked about a perfect storm, I even dare to say that we're in the midst of the roaring 20s of the protein transition. We are fortunately not even halfway, so we still have 6 years to avoid a crash, as there was last century in the States. But all the signs are there, and one of these signs that are made explicit also, that is really triggering the meat and dairy industry, that consumer behavior is actually changing, and so there is a very intrinsic motivation now coming up. And I haven't even mentioned CSRD. Some of you may have heard of that, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is also forcing meat and dairy companies to really look at the environmental impact of their products. So, and these you may perceive as, let's say, negative drivers. So, forcing the companies to become more involved in this topic. But I dare to say that we're always talking about big companies and big industries and organizations, but I cannot think of one single meat or dairy company in the Netherlands in which there are currently also internal game changers. So people at the right level in the organization that really see this change happening, and also seeking the collaboration with communities like that of the protein communities and other people in the ecosystem. And of course, there will still be a lobby. And we've also seen in Austria some activities around the acceptance of cellular meat, for example, as we have seen it in India, in Italy and in France as well. I see this as some final signals of the old reality. And I do cherish the internal game changes at all these companies that are seeking out and are seeking out towards collaboration. So to conclude, Harold, on your question, we are not seeking the meat-based industry to tackle them as a whole. But on the other hand, we do cherish the game changers and the companies that are looking forward and are also giving their hands towards collaboration. I'm very confident that that will be successful in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both. Ich gehe jetzt wieder zurück aufs Deutsche. Ich glaube, wir haben jetzt keine weiteren Fragen mehr. Wir sind auch mit der Zeit ganz überpünktlich sogar. Ganz vielen herzlichen Dank euch beiden für die tollen Präsentationen und Inspirationen. Und ja, wie schon erwähnt, wir würden uns sehr freuen, wenn wir Sie jetzt als Zuhörer, einige von Ihnen inspirieren könnten, um an unserer Zukunftsreise teilzunehmen. Details kommen, Sie können sich gerne schon jetzt mal per E-Mail Ihr Interesse bekunden, würden wir uns sehr freuen. Die Präsentation können Sie hochladen, dann finden Sie auch die Kontaktdaten von den beiden Herren, um direkt mit Ihnen Kontakt aufzunehmen und sich auszutauschen. Genau, in diesem Sinne sage ich herzlichen Dank fürs Zuhören und dabei sein und herzlichen Dank noch einmal Roger und Jeroen. Een goede middag. Tot ziens.
Tot ziens.
Ziens, auf Wiedersehen.